Hey, my name is Ollie. I'm an artist and animator, and on this channel, I give you my perspective as an artist on video games and animation. In this video, I'll be reviewing The Medium. The Medium is a tense, story-driven psychological horror game from indie developer Bloober Team. I played through the game and studied its art book to learn more about the art and design that make up its haunting aesthetic. I'll give you some interesting insights into what I discovered. But is The Medium worth a play? And can it scare the pants off of you? Let's find out. I'm a huge fan of survival horror video games. No, seriously. Silent Hill 2 even helped me get my art degree. I did a research project on Silent Hill 2 during my final year at university, and I got to closely examine the subgenre of horror video games and gained an appreciation for this style of game design. So I was pretty excited when I saw the first official reveal for The Medium. By all accounts, it looked and felt like it was going to be a classic survival horror experience, refreshed for the modern era. But to be fair, during the reveal, the developers never mentioned the term survival horror. Even so, the reveal was intense, intriguing, and the imagery of dark, moody, real-world settings, rapidly decaying to reveal eerie dystopian landscapes, stuck in my mind. There was even the scene, this one, in the reveal that looked like they were paying homage to Silent Hill 2. Oh, and also, they mentioned Akira Yamaoka, legendary composer and one of the original members of Team Silent, the developers behind Silent Hill 2, would be contributing to the project. So I was stoked. But then, the developers described The Medium as a psychological horror game. And that's fair because that's what it is. Even though it looks like a survival horror game, it's missing the survival.
Hello? Anyone?
You play as Marianne, a troubled young woman who walks the line between the familiar real world and the haunting spirit world. Marianne is a medium and uses a set of otherworldly abilities to play the role of a kind of psychic detective. But you won't be carefully managing health and ammo resources to stay alive, and you won't be squaring up with any scary monsters. However, you will need to be stealthy and sneak around to avoid the scary monsters. But that's not too difficult because the scary monster AI seems to be dumb as bricks, and if by some fluke you actually manage to get yourself killed, don't worry, there's no consequences for death. You just restart right before you messed up and try again as many times as you like. The game is super easy and it's kind of like a point-and-click adventure game. You solve puzzles as you slowly traverse the levels, and you're going to spend a good chunk of the early game just walking. I wouldn't have an issue with this, but the thing that irked me is how slow your character moves and performs basic actions. The animation for these are painfully slow, and sometimes advancing through a scene requires too many unnecessary button presses. At times, your ability to run is locked, slowing down the pace even further. And I know the developers are trying to craft a cinematic experience, and that may be why some of these design choices were made. I mean, you don't see people running all over the place in movies, but some of these things broke the immersion for me or started to become frustrating. There's an option in the settings to make some of the extra button presses automatic, but it doesn't seem to affect the traversal aspects of gameplay. The puzzle solving fares much better. Yes, some of these feel like busy work, but solving puzzles across two different realities using your abilities as a medium is really fun, and this is where the game shines, because it features some really creative, well-designed puzzles. I like that sometimes you have to piece clues together by inspecting props or paying attention to the environmental storytelling, and I really did feel like a sort of psychic detective.
Here it is.
My favorite sequence in the game is a puzzle involving a grandfather clock. The clever storytelling and level animation in this scene are both outstanding. The developers also do a good job of leveraging Marianne's otherworldly abilities during these segments, although none of the puzzles are especially challenging. What The Medium lacks in terms of gameplay, it more than makes up for with its intriguing narrative. The heart of its story centers around a mystery which unravels via Marianne, who's tasked with investigating the abandoned Hotel Neva, where bad stuff happened. If I'm being a little vague, it's because the story is one of the game's strong points. The less you know about it going in, the better. It's a story with some big twists and turns that really surprised me, and one that gets better on a second playthrough because of your refreshed perspective on the events that take place. It's an emotional story that gets increasingly darker as it progresses, and to be quite honest, disturbing at points. The writers weren't afraid to tackle sensitive topics, making this warning at the start screen completely valid, although some of the dialogue can be awkward and feel a little out of place at times, especially Marianne's one-liners.
Okay, Marianne. Now get your ghostly ass back and power up that elevator.
Although the medium is not technically a survival horror game, it shares a lot of hallmarks of classic survival horror masterpieces, like the fixed camera perspectives. You aren't able to manipulate the camera manually. Rather, the developers set camera positions to create cinematic scenes that show off the levels in a beautiful filmic way. And I really like this approach, because the environment and prop designs are absolutely stunning. There were a few annoying frame drops when moving from scene to scene, especially with ray tracing enabled. The levels set in the real world use a color palette filled with desaturated blues and grays, which make the Hotel Neva feel cold and empty, creating a feeling of loneliness and abandonment. There are tons of little props and debris that litter the hotel, which often allude to past events, and when you look closer at some of these, they can reveal some pretty creepy details. During my playthrough, I was constantly on the lookout for clues I could spot among the rubble of the hotel. The environmental storytelling on display here is astounding, and while the levels are not hyper photorealistic, the quality of the assets and textures are quite impressive with or without ray tracing. On the flip side, the design of the spirit world was inspired by the paintings of genius artist Zdzislaw Beksiński. Like many of Beksiński's paintings, the spirit world in the medium is filled with chilling dystopian landscapes and sinister architecture, which sets an unnerving and uncomfortable tone. You'll notice a lot of withering figures buried under skin and bone-like structures among the level geometry, and there's a kind of ambiguity that makes these environments especially unnerving. But as creepy as they can be, they are also mesmerizing. Thanks to details like bursts of vibrant colors cutting through the decay, or waves of light piercing through architecture set against moody skies, the creative environment and prop design is quite impressive. And it's a good thing the environments are so well done, because the standout feature of the medium is its dual reality system. These are segments of gameplay or cutscenes that split the screen in two, depicting both the material world and the spirit world at the same time. You would think this would get pretty confusing for the player, right? No, not at all. It actually works quite well because the two settings are so distinctly designed. They stand apart from each other and somehow feel familiar at the same time. I think the dual reality cutscenes are pretty cool because sometimes when Marianne interacts with a character or prop in the spirit world, it looks like she's talking to herself or holding an invisible object in the material world. It's quite an uncanny visual. The game's performance tends to get a little shaky during these sequences though. Strangely, the in-game character models and animations lack a bit of polish. Okay, they aren't that bad, although some of the character models and textures are a little uninspired compared to their stellar environmental counterparts. The characters lack life and believability, with stiff animations and sometimes forgetting to blink, leaving them staring blankly into space. There is one standout character though that gives a really good performance. No, I'm not saying the character designs themselves are bad. They're actually pretty good, and artists created some really interesting motifs, like the mask characters in the spirit world, but I just don't think the character art translated well to the final in-game models and textures. I also wish they went with a more memorable design for Marianne, and a few of the other characters, because they certainly had a wealth of striking designs to choose from looking through the art book. As much as the medium succeeds in presenting some gorgeous scenery and a compelling story, it falls a little short when it comes to delivering a gripping gameplay experience. The odd design choices and lack of polish and optimization don't help either. The medium is still a good game, just not a great one, and is worth playing for the beautiful art and story alone. I think the medium is 3-star silver. I can tell that the talented developers and artists put a lot of passion into this project, and it's quite cool that they were willing to revisit a bygone era of game design. Like I said in the intro, I really appreciate games like Silent Hill 2, which defy conventional game design. It would be cool to see more developers take a chance like Bloober Team. Respect. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you really liked it, you can show me by liking and subscribing. It helps out the channel too. Good luck and good night.